Welcome back to Big Riff Energy. It's Tuesday, February 25th. Been doing this podcast for 2 years. Hard to believe. And it's episode 96. I'm going to be getting into a lot of good stuff today. Fan questions and doing a top 5 best Doom debut ranking list. But first, I got to mention the Black Sabbath rug pull. Almost resembling the same strategy that these crypto scams are doing, although not quite as egregious. If you watched or listened to the last episode, we were talking about this Black Sabbath reunion thing. They had sort of mentioned that Ozzy would be doing a short solo set. We've seen a lot of outrage and frustration over the Live Nation Ticketmaster handling of ticket sales, of course. There were people that tried to get in the queue within like minutes of the tickets going on sale, and they'd be like 95,000th person in the queue. And then, of course, tickets are probably already being scalped at insanely unaffordable prices. So I spoke about seeing Black Sabbath in Phoenix and the whole floor level, basically, at least the first like 5 rows just being weird, creepy, Kardashian looking, uber wealthy people that were bored, sitting down, looking to be like relatively unfamiliar with Black Sabbath's material. I would like to think that this reunion would be a nice way for some kid who's 13 to be able to see Black Sabbath, and maybe there'll be a couple there. But I think, unfortunately, it's going to be almost exclusively industry people and hyper wealthy people, which seems to be a running theme these days. Those seem to be the only people that can pull off doing anything cool anymore. We should start busting out guillotines. I keep saying it. But yeah, so after this thing sells out, then they say, oh, Ozzy's going to do bits and pieces with Black Sabbath. Whatever that means. Am I mad at Ozzy? Of course not. Of course not. But it seems to be a typical cutthroat managerial move that his team has been long known for and infamous for. But speaking of that, I did watch an interview with Sharon Osbourne. I guess Billy Corgan has a podcast now, and he's really, really, really good at it. Really good at it. And, you know, I've read a million books of other accounts of things that transpired with Sharon Osbourne's managerial style and stuff like that. And I have to say, it was really cool to finally hear her perspective in a very unfiltered. It's clear that her and Billy Corgan have a great relationship and respect each other a great deal, but he didn't water down his questions. I'll just put it that way. So it was cool to see her story from her perspective finally, and I kind of get it. Am I mad at Ozzy? No. Am I mad at Sharon? No. If you listen to this last episode of this podcast, kind of saw something like that coming. You know, that sort of seems to be the MO for these legacy acts these days. You see it, they're just clogging up the tour cycle. You know, even a band like Cannibal Corpse, who great dudes, great band, and they've always prided themselves on taking out relatively unknown bands, at least as their opener, maybe even the first 2 out of 4. The touring industry has shifted so much, and the live performing industry has shifted so much that it's almost like even a band that has always been dedicated to shining a spotlight on newer, cool bands in their genre, it's almost like they're not even quite able to do it anymore. That's just kind of like going away. These legacy acts, as they're aging and, you know, having to pay bills, and there's less and less money in live performing, which we'll get to in a fan question here momentarily. It's like these bands have to do stuff that they know is going to be a home run, grand slam, solid financial guaranteed success. And I don't know that is what's best for music the future of music. This year's looking bleak, dude. It's looking bleak. So far I've seen 2 album announcements that I give a shit about. This new Night album is coming out in what, 2-3 weeks. I think on the same day the new Wake album is coming out. I've heard both of them. They're great. I have not seen nor heard even hints of other albums that are coming out this year that I could care about at all. The tour announcements this year are just like heinous. It's just yeah, we'll get into that. Let me get into these fan questions. I'll give y'all a little sneak peek of what to expect here. I have a guitar sitting next to me. I'm gonna try to play some riffs because I got questioned about like heaviest non-metal riffs, and I thought it would be cooler to just play them on guitar rather than try to like punch them in later or hum them or whatever. But we're gonna talk about the best way of supporting up and coming bands. We're gonna talk about this guy is asking me, Aaron is asking me if 2024 was the second best year in the history of metal, and I thought that you were out of your goddamn mind until I read the email. We'll get to that. Somebody wanted me to talk about Trouble, the band, which I have done, but I'll do some more. So that inspired me to want to talk about the top 5 doom metal debuts of all time. And yeah, a few more things, but let's start at the top here. Calvin, aka the Death Metal Pug. What is the best way to support a band? You hear about merch cuts, physical copies of stuff. Music apps do not pay much. They don't pay anything. But what gets money into the pockets of bands? We have always heard about buying more merch for support. I have so many shirts and clothes that I have lately just been trying to buy a patch and letting the band keep the change for a 20. It's 6 feet under. I bought a $5 lighter and let them keep the change. Aborted, sold socks for $20 that I suspect have a big profit margin. What's the best way to support a low to mid-level band in 2025? Thanks, Death Metal Pug. Yeah, it just depends what their situation is. Generally speaking, the past few decades, starting with illegal downloading, which sort of got co-opted by tech bros and dressed up as quote unquote streaming, which is just an even more insidious way of completely annihilating the value of music monetarily and stealing from songwriters and artists. Really apps like Spotify and stuff like that, it's even more insidious than Napster, because Napster was just like, here's some music for free and everybody knows what it is. It was very transparent. You're just stealing music, whatever. This new shit, Spotify and everything, it's dressed up in this like, it's this whole tech bro PR, like rose tinted presentation, but they're literally just fucking stealing from, I mean, it's legal theft because the laws based that sort of dictate that industry were drafted in relation to like phonograph records when they first came out. Like phonograph record players with the big horn on it, those are still the laws that are being used to dictate like the payment structure in streaming, as far as I understand. And good luck getting the federal government to do anything relevant that has to do with like blue collar people being ripped off with some sort of technological thing. Do you see them deposing the Google guys? These motherfuckers have no idea what's going on with any sort of technology or anything relating to that. So, yeah, you just said music apps do not pay much. They basically pay nothing unless you're Kendrick Lamar or somebody with fucking zero talent, but you're like a CIA operative or an industry plant. You're not getting paid from streaming. So that whole concept, the decades long process of psychologically enforcing in everyone that music has no monetary value, has essentially turned actual working musicians into traveling t-shirt salesmen. So the best way to support a band is to buy a shirt on tour. And you see the prices going up and up and up and up. You know, for a long time, the most I ever charged was $20. And I think when we toured with COC, we just price matched them and it was like $40. And I felt like a scumbag charging that much for a shirt, but that's where we're at. Speaking personally, the best way to support me is to buy music on Bandcamp. You know, we talk about streaming apps. I don't put Bandcamp in that category. They're not perfect, but like if you buy an $8 digital album from Bandcamp, I think I get like half of that essentially when it's all said and done, like $6 or something like that. Which if you listen to my music on Spotify, if you stream one of my songs 1 million times, I'll probably get like $5 or something like that. So also there's conventional record deals and there's kind of the newer model. The deal that I signed with Century Media was a conventional record deal. So Century Media is owned by Sony. So if you buy those records or stream those records, I'm getting conventional record deal royalties, which amount to like 12% or something like that. So every once in a while, I'll see a check from Sony. The $20 spin deal is a 50-50 split on everything. And Neon Nightmare and now Spirit Adrift are both going to be working with $20 spin moving forward. So if you buy records or CDs or whatever from $20 spin, that's a really, really good way of supporting me while we're not on tour. While we're on tour, just buy merch. Yeah, that's it, man. It's kind of seems like the tech bro, out of touch, predatory, super wealthy thing has just like crushed every single industry that there is in the world, especially in the States. I think other countries sort of have borderline protections for those kind of things, but I know the Live Nation Ticketmaster thing has pretty much taken over the UK now and is creeping into other countries like in the European Union and other places like that. So buy physical stuff. Go to Bandcamp and buy stuff there too. Those are the two best ways, at least speaking for me personally. And if I ever get a chance, I still have records and merch and stuff sitting here. So I upload stuff on Big Cartel every once in a while. So that's a good way as well. Hey there, buddy. Aussie Aaron here. I know you're in the Riff dungeon banging out some riffage with your old pal Skeleton Steve. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. 86 is widely regarded as the undisputed king of definitive metal years, but was 2024 the best year in metal since or even before? I know there will be arguments for years of landmark releases, such as the year of Black Sabbath's debut, but I'm thinking more along the lines of the sheer volume of really high quality releases across all subgenres, so much so by the time you thought the album you were spinning was going to be your favorite of the year, another absolute rip snorter came out the following week. It was almost impossible to keep up. There was so much cool stuff coming out. Not only that, but the number of smaller, super cool independent labels signing and supporting some of the best new bands and releasing all the best stuff, and even the number of independent heavy metal record stores that have popped up post-COVID. Shout out to Simon and Blackened Records and Brizzy. The bloke's a legend, ex-school teacher turned underground metal record store owner and operator, and all ages local metal gig promoter. Yeah, these are the kind of guys that are going to keep us from drowning in the sea of tech bro predatory supremacy, you know. So shout out to Simon. Just the vibe also seemed more communal and connected again. Fans seem to be listening to and supporting a wide range of bands and genres, most likely because there's been a ridiculous number of excellent albums released that can't be ignored. Yeah, I'm getting the point. Old legends like Priest, new blood like Eternal, established tour de forces like Blood Incantation. Yeah, I thought maybe you had been hit in the head when I first glanced at this question. But no offense, but no, that makes sense. I see what you're saying. So you're planting your flag for 2024 being the second best year in metal of all time. My short answer to that would be there's no fucking way. There's no way. I always try to do exercises to get myself dialed in when I'm working on a new album. For Ghost at the Gallows, I did this exercise where I took a notebook and every day I would look at a different year. I think I started with 69 or 70, which is funny because there's a question coming up kind of in that vein. But I would try to like figure out what are my top 10 favorite albums of each year, starting from, yeah, probably 69. Dude, some of those years I couldn't get it down to like 30. And these are albums like that are inventing new genres of music, inventing new ways of doing heavy music, inventing new vocal styles, inventing new songwriting style. You know, in 2024, there wasn't a single new thing invented. A lot of people think that Blood Incantation invented a new thing, but you need to like do your fucking homework. It's good, no hate on it, but like there's nothing. The most that bands are doing now, even bands that I love, let's take Inner Arma, for instance. I would never insult these guys, but they seem super duper duper unique and totally like revelatory. But they're just combining ingredients that already sort of existed. And you could say that about every band, but sometimes things get thrown in a blender and something comes out that didn't exist before. Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness, you know, the first Death album, the first Black Sabbath album. And it's been, I think it's been 30 years since that's happened in metal. And I don't really personally care about it that much. I'm a guilty party of just throwing shit in a blender that already exists. You know, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But to compare 2024 to, it was a good year. I agree with you that it was really solid. I think there's been a couple years in the last 5 since COVID. Like one year was the worst year. I think it was 2022. When I was doing that list of like my favorite albums of every year, I got to here in the 90s. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was 97, maybe something like that. I was like, holy shit. Like I couldn't find 4 albums that I thought were great, you know? And then I think it was 2022. I felt the same way about. Last year was way better, but it's looking like this year's going to be another version of 2022, if not worse. But yeah, I can't say that I would put 2024 in the top 20 years. I just can't, man. My second favorite, 86 was good. I think 84 was really good too. And 87. Every year in the 80s was really good. Most of the years in the 70s, especially once Priest got going, was really good. Most of the years in the 90s were really good. Even into the 2000s, you have new ambitious, unique stuff coming out like Mastodon and Baroness and even High on Fire, you know. And I just personally haven't seen any sort of important evolutionary bands in this decade so far. So my answer would be no. Oliver, hope all is well and you're firing up some nasty riffs these days. Yes, it's going good. The reason I'm writing to you this time because I got a topic for you in the podcast. I was thinking it could be interesting if you would be up for the cask to elaborate a bit more on your love for the band Trouble. I know you from time to time have talked very highly about Trouble, furthermore rocking their t-shirts every show. What the fuck? Can you go into why they're so great? And your sentence is a like psychedelic experience here, dude. Can you go into why they're so great and underappreciated in general public, and which they surely are in both cases? Good day to you, sir, Oliver. Yeah, I really, really love the first 2 Trouble albums. And again, they threw pre-existing stuff into a blender and something sort of new came out. It's the doom and gloom and dark vibe of Black Sabbath with the 2 guitar attack of Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, and Slayer and bands like that, you know, great guitar harmonies. It's basically Black Sabbath with guitar harmonies, but then they also have a love of like 60s psychedelic music. They did a lot of drugs. So they were on that trip, and they were on this spiritual trip that sort of more resembled like, yeah, music from the 60s, you know. And then Eric Wagner with the sort of, I don't know, man, doing his own thing. It's sort of inspired, of course, by like Halford and Freddie Mercury, probably, and King Diamond, maybe a little bit, but he has like a just his own thing. Is it freaky type shit? Like nobody was quite doing that exact vocal sound before, and they had the look, they had everything, man. And I love the first two records, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Uh, and I love the self-titled record that Rick Rubin did. Run to the Light, I think they were kind of falling apart. I'm pretty sure they were like getting strung out at that point. But it's just one of those things, man. It's hard to keep a band together. Like they had a lot going for them. They got signed to Metal Blade. They were working with Rick Rubin at one point. Pantera kept taking them on stadium tours and arena tours, and uh, it's just hard to hold a band together. Even when everybody's on top of their shit. But if you got everybody strung out and doing drugs and partying, and then the ego stuff gets a little out of control. So I think that's kind of the overarching story of that band, and possibly why they're not more appreciated by the general public. Although I think it's one of those things like what's happening with Acid Bath right now, where it's like they couldn't get the time of day for most of their career. And now, because of the nostalgic thing, everybody loves them. And yeah, it's the same thing if somebody dies in a band. It's kind of weird. And I think maybe Eric Wagner dying did that for Trouble like a little bit. I think about it all the time. Like, if I died tomorrow, all of my music would instantly become 10 times more popular. And what a tragedy that is. It's just it's a weird, and I'm guilty of it too. Like anytime somebody dies, I like David Lynch dying, I watched all his movies again, and John Prine dying, I listened to, Tom Petty. We're all guilty of that. But it's just a weird, yeah, fact of life, I guess. But I'll talk a little bit more about the first couple Trouble albums, but you got me thinking, because people are asking, how the riffs are going and stuff like that. And the first wave doom metal stuff has been real present on my mind and on my turntable and in my ears while I'm working on this next Spirit Adrift album. I'm really fascinated with the emergence of all the sort of more obscure subgenres that was happening in the 80s. So Sabbath has always been a big inspiration, obviously. Stuff like Priest and like the first wave of actual just original metal bands. But what I've been super fascinated by is like, yeah, the emergence of thrash. So bands like Exodus and early Metallica and first couple Testament albums. And then the emergence of death metal, more extreme metal, Celtic Frost, and like the early Death stuff, the early Morbid Angel stuff. And most importantly, the emergence of doom metal as a subgenre. So I thought I'd talk about the best debuts, and I'm going to rank them. Number 5, St. Vitus, self-titled. Too punk for the metalheads, and too weird and metal for the punks, and too slow for everybody, and too fast for everybody, and learning on the job. LA band. They definitely did not fit in with metal at the time, because it was like hair metal was sort of showing up, or proto hair metal, like Van Halen and shit like that. And these guys are total Black Sabbath doom and gloom freaks, very raw, kind of learning their instruments and learning how to write songs on the job. But there's something very, very appealing and endearing about that. So I'll put that at number 5, the first St. Vitus album. Yeah, it's the rawest one for sure out of the records I'm going to be talking about here. Number 4, Candlemass from Sweden, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus from 86. I've been listening to this for a long time, but more kind of just for research purposes, It took me a really long time to get where I liked it. And it's because of the bass tone. And It is just the worst, wimpiest, most confusingly thin and bad bass tone I've ever heard on a record. And I try to imagine what it would be like with the bass tone from like a Wake album or something like that. But the songs are good once you sort of get familiarized with the structures and sort of uh the songwriting approach. They start to make a little more sense. There's some sort of left field curveball type stuff, but this album's super important and it's great. Um, if that bass tone was better, I would like it a lot more. But number 4, Candlemass, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus. Number 3, Pentagram, Relentless. Technically, this is their debut. You know, their 70s Pentagram, which Bobby was writing the majority of the stuff. And then he met Victor Griffin and they sort of were splitting songwriting. And I've been way more into the Victor Griffin stuff lately, especially on the second album. But this one's really good. The A side is fantastic. And it ends with 20 Buck Spin, which is a great song. But again, Sign of the Wolf's a great song. Bobby wrote that one. But I really like the Victor Griffin stuff. Yeah, number 3, Pentagram, Relentless. Number 2, Trouble. This was originally self-titled, then they changed it to Psalm 9 when they did a self-titled record in the 90s. Something I was going to say, I was looking at that Pentagram record trying to figure out something that I was discovering as I'm talking about this. Some of my issue with these Doom bands is kind of twofold, but it's a similar issue. The A side of these albums will be really, really, really good, and the B side will be not as good. And also, I feel that way about certain individual songs, and Trouble is super guilty of this, where a song will have like 4 or 5 or 6 really, really, really good parts, but then they'll be in the middle of like the coolest thing you've ever heard, and they try to get smart and progressive, and it goes into like doo-doo. Whereas they could just not try to be smart and they could just be dumb, like St. Vitus, and just take out all the doo-doo parts that are trying to show everybody how like ambitious and forward thinking and progressive and technical they are. So that's it's not as much of a problem with Pentagram, but Trouble for sure, Candlemass for sure. It's like just play the cool parts. But that being said, Psalm 9 is awesome. I can't ever decide if I like this one or the second album better. They both sort of fall into that, like they'll be doing something super duper duper cool, and then randomly there's just a part that like is unnecessary and kind of goofy and like pulls the momentum out. But all that aside, I would still sort of give this album like a 9.5 out of 10 or whatever. Trouble, Psalm 9 is the number 2 best doom metal debut. The best one that sort of avoids the negative aspects that I was mentioning, Solitude Eternus, Into the Depths of Sorrow. I think this is the best debut of any doom band ever, whether it's first wave doom, second wave doom, funeral doom. I know this is all pretty much like old school first wave doom represented. That's because it's my favorite. I like funeral doom and stuff like that, and really heavy, slow, doomy and death doom and all that. But the most interesting and most exciting stuff to me is this first and maybe second-ish wave of like traditional doom, because they've got really interesting riffs. They have singing, there's melodic singing. And I love extreme, death metal type vocals. But having singing just gives you one more thing, one more dimension to make the music that much more interesting, and it gives you that much more of a chance of standing out and being unique. Because when you're doing death metal vocals, you can make it sound really cool. There's guys like Brett Hoffman that do pitches to where he's almost kind of singing. But singing actual notes, yeah, it just gives you one more little thing to make your band and your music interesting. So maybe that's part of why all of these top 5 doom metal debuts are clean vocals, but dude, Solitude Eternus, Into the Depths of Sorrow is the best one. It's a 10 out of 10 album. I don't think there's a weak moment on it. So, top 5 doom metal debuts. I'll talk some more about Trouble. I got into this band. It's a long story, but I got to be pretty good buds with Jimmy Bauer from New Orleans when I was young, and he told me about Trouble, but he told me to listen to The Skull. This one, album number 2. And again, it's like impossible to determine which of their first 2 albums I like the most, but they're definitely, the first 2 are the best. Self-titled from 1990 or whatever is good too. But I've joked about it on here before, like Christian themes, overt, heavy-handed Christian themes, but the riffs are so evil that they're being co-opted by satanic black metal bands. And to be specific, there's a riff in Pray for the Dead, which I co-opted a different riff, but Kraft from Sweden, the Fuck the Universe band, the super duper evil anti-Christian band, co-opted a Trouble riff from the song Pray for the Dead. And it's my favorite Kraft song. But see if you can figure out which one. Anyway, yeah, your riffs must be pretty heavy if you're like a sort of kind of Christian band and you've got satanic black metal bands stealing your riffs. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about Trouble. They got Kyle Thomas on vocals, dude from Exhorder, and he was in Alabama Thunder Pussy for a while. If you remember that band, Relapse band, they're like the punk rock Leonard Skinner. And Kyle's a great singer. I actually think, I think Kyle, this is blasphemy, but I think Kyle Thomas is a significantly better singer than Eric Wagner was. I think Eric, it's kind of like Armando Acosta, the drummer of St. Vitus. Was he a technically astounding drummer? No, but his vibe was perfect for that band. And I feel the same way about Eric Wagner. But I do think that technically Kyle, and that's not knocking Eric, because I would put Kyle in like probably the top 10 metal vocalists ever. So they're kind of doing a comeback from what I understand. They signed with this label in the Netherlands, called Hammerheart, which is a great label. They do mostly like reissues and stuff, and that's how I got these Trouble albums. But there's been rumblings that they're gonna do a new album and they're gonna try to like really get back at it and hit it. So that's exciting. You know, we actually a couple years ago, our European agents were talking to us about doing like a Trouble Spirit Adrift tour, but yeah, I don't guess it ever happened. So they're still working out the kinks, but you know, I keep an open mind. They got the 2 guitar players, Kyle Thomas. That's, you know, I'm pretty cynical about all these legacy acts, like tribute acts, cash grab, kind of like nostalgia things, but you can do it right. I think Acid Bath is doing it as right as they possibly can. I think sounds like Trouble's trying to do it as right as they possibly can. So we'll see. But check out those first 2 albums. Chase, hey Nate, I hope this finds you well. I had a couple discussion ideas I wanted to share with you. Okay, there's a bunch of stuff here. Some of it I'm not going to address because it's like you'd have to do a full video on it. But one of them was, what are the heaviest non-metal riffs? Top 10 heaviest riffs in non-metal songs. So this is kind of weird because it would all be like hard rock or proto metal, you know? So you're kind of cheating if you do that, because it's like things that would have been considered metal in 1970 or 1980, some of them are not considered metal now. But I'm going to tell you, there's 2 riffs that popped into my head like right out of the gate. Let me make sure this guitar is working. And we talk about Gene Clark, No Other, a lot on here. I think I've turned a lot of y'all onto that record. And we can soundly say that Gene Clark, No Other is not a metal record. It's not even really a hard rock record. It's a psychedelic, folky rock record, right? So I think this one is the best example I can think of. And I'm in C sharp. They were probably in standard tuning, so it's probably not going to sound right. But It goes like sounds like a damn typo negative riff, man. And see, it's that combination of you guitar nerds will appreciate this. There's pentatonic scale right here, basically the blues scale. Right, Black Sabbath, typo negative, that sort of thing. But then you've got chromatic, which typo uses a lot, which I've been using a lot too. Great riff. So yeah, that I forget the name of the song, but I think it's the last song on Gene Clark, No Other. And a lot of what makes something heavy to me is context. And so you've heard this whole record that's like dreamy and spacey and psyched out and beautiful. And then they kick into that. And it's just like within the context of something that's not heavy at all, that riff comes across like super heavy. The other one that I thought about, yeah, I think this is working. This is the first time I've ever done this. So new setup, new location, new vibe in here, and new technology. But I think it's all finally starting to lock in. Blue Oyster Cult, they were considered metal or metal adjacent in the 70s and 80s. Now, maybe not so much. But this riff, Nosferatu, it's the last song on Spectres. And I wasn't even really familiar with it until we went and saw Nosferatu at Alamo and they were playing it. I was like, what the fuck is that? I never made it all the way through Spectres, man. I'm not a huge Blue Oyster Cult fan. And for whatever reason, they put their best song they ever wrote at the end of the album. But I think it's something like this. Bear with me, but it's like... Yeah. Sorry, sloppy. I learned these riffs like today. But those were the first two that came to mind. To like not cheat on the question, I think a lot of the heaviest non-metal riffs would be in like hip hop songs. So I thought of an album that came out when I was in like 7th grade, Dr. Dre Chronic 2001. There's riffs like all over that, and they're all heavy. And I think the vast majority of them are original, as opposed to being sampled from, you know, older songs. 3 6 Mafia, they got a lot of really super heavy riffs in their song. And then like some country music to me is heavy. It's all just kind of relative, you know. But you also asked about heaviest acoustic riffs or clean riffs. The song or the riff or whatever that got me into Waylon Jennings, thus kind of getting me into country, is a song called Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way? But it's not so much the riff, it's more the rhythm section. It's kind of got like an AC/DC, really like hard hitting, driving sort of vibe. So it's all relative, but those were the first two riffs that popped in my mind. What do we got? Okay. Who's your choice for director for the Sabbath biopic? Who's the dream cast? What's the most important moments they have to get right? Would have to be James Mangold, right? He did like, he's done all of them. I think he's the guy that gets it right, probably. I feel like the guy that played Freddie Mercury could play Tony for sure. And Timothy Chalamet could be Bill. If you look at Bill clean shaven, he was pretty. He was very pretty. Ozzy, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with young actors. Yeah, I don't know. You could get a young Michael Shannon to play Geezer because he's got the 1,000-yard acid stare, you know, so that might be good. Okay. Yeah, you asked about top 10 heaviest acoustic riffs. I can't think of a single heavy acoustic riff. But I did think about the first Paul Bearer record. The first song starts with just like a single acoustic guitar. And I wouldn't say that it's heavy, but it's emotionally heavy. I'll say that. and there's a tension and a tragedy to it. So that's the first one that comes to mind. Foreigner by Paul Bearer, the intro to that. Now here's an interesting one. You wake up and it's January 1st, 1969. You're you with all your same knowledge and experiences, but it's an alternate reality where every riff and song made after that point will never be written unless you do so. You can't use your own material. What's on your first album? How will you musically impact the 70s, 80s, and so on? How does your career go? Uh, yeah, I'm one of the things here is you can't use your own material. That's interesting because I kind of look at this like I'm really not envious of anything anybody else has done in music. Because like I'm pretty okay with what I've done. I want to do more and I want to keep getting better, but I'm like pretty okay with what I've done as far as the actual music part of it is concerned. So it would be I would try to save like Black Sabbath and good metal stuff, but it would another aspect of it would be like how much money can I get here? So I would maybe do like the first 6 Black Sabbath albums, and then maybe some of these Doom albums, maybe like Celtic Frost. If it was 1959, I'll do the Beatles and just like laugh my way all the way to the bank. But then like once I preserved the music that I really like, the real important stuff like Master of Puppets and stuff like that, I would write and wouldn't write it, but I would record all that shit. Try to do it like 1 year before it actually happened. Because if you go any farther before that, people probably wouldn't be accepting of it. And if you wait too long, maybe you miss your window or whatever. But dude, once I get into the 80s, I don't know enough of Thriller, but if I knew the full Thriller album, I would just do that. I would record that, like hunt down Quincy Jones, have the demos, record Thriller like the year before they actually did it. And then I could do whatever I want, you know? So it'd be like Hot Tub Time Machine when that guy goes back and invests in like Apple and Google or no, he invents Google. Yeah, I would invent Thriller and I'd be good to go. Okay, that's all the questions. I'll be damned. Write me at bigriffenergy@gmail.com. Give me some more stuff to talk about. Check out if you're interested in the Black Sabbath situation. Watch that interview with Billy Corgan and Sharon Osbourne. It's very interesting. It explains a lot about why she is the way she is. You know, there's a band from New Hampshire called Scissor Fight. I don't know if any of you have heard them, but they're a lot of fun. They're like Clutch, if Clutch was like from a bizarre alternate dimension that was like all just meth heads, you know, from hell or something. But they have a song called, I was thinking about it while I was watching the Sharon Osbourne thing. Scissor Fight has a song called Out Motherfucker the Man. And it's about how, you know, the man is holding us all down and they're motherfuckers and we have to out motherfucker them. And something about the title of that song has always just stuck in the back of my mind since the first time I heard it. But that's what Sharon had to do. She was in an industry that was 100% dominated by men, and some of the most aggressive, cutthroat, dangerous. This is back when managers weren't giant fucking pussies that just like lived on the internet. Like, this is when band managers sent mafia guys with guns to tell you what to do and that sort of thing, which I think that was a better system. I think that was a way better. I think most things operated better when the mafia had a lot of power in the world. So what does that tell you? I just feel like the mafia guys are a little more transparent and you know what you're in for compared to the people that are running stuff today, the heads of these giant corporations and tech bros and the CEO of Spotify and all those kind of guys. I would rather work with the mafia. I think I understand them more and would get along with them better. But that's the world that she came up in. And like I said, I've read I don't know, that the conversation just made a really, really huge impression on me. And it like humanized a person that I didn't think I would ever be capable of sympathizing with or understanding or like borderline even kind of liking, to be honest. Yeah, I've read so many books written by dudes, not to make it about this, but I mean, it is kind of about this. You know, Tony Iommi talks about her in his book. Geezer talks about her. Ozzy talks about her. Rudy Sarzo talks about her. Bob Daisley talks about her. Any book that is written having anything to do with Black Sabbath or Ozzy, they're going to talk about Sharon and have views on Sharon and stuff. And it's like she was already in an industry that's completely 100% dominated by men, crazy men, you know? And then every account of her managerial style and stuff like that is written by dudes in that industry. It was just nice to hear her side of it. I strongly recommend it. But man, that's a rug pull. That's a rug pull to say Black Sabbath's getting back together and then being like, oh, now that it's sold out, Ozzy's doing bits and pieces. So let me know how you feel about that in the comments. I know how I feel. And yeah, write me bigriffenergy@gmail.com. Tell me what to talk about. The riffs are flowing. I don't know if you can see it, but I made a podcast of stuff that's been, or playlist, I'm sorry, made a playlist of stuff that's been heavily influencing the new Spirit Adrift material. I don't know what service you use, but you should be able to see it on Spotify. The user name is Spirit Adrift. So if you're interested in that, check it out. It'll give you a little bit of an idea of what's coming up. And soon I'll be revealing more details about live performances. And yeah, that's been fun. I've got a totally new setup. I've got the Riff Dungeon for writing and demoing. I've got this area for podcasting. I also now have this area set up for rehearsing the live Spirit Adrift set, which we've all been rehearsing for several weeks now. And I'm going to do an episode on everything that's transpired in that world over the last couple of years and everything that's about to transpire. Once I'm allowed to actually talk about the live stuff that's coming up, but it's been really interesting. And it's been a cool period in life. And I'm very, very happy to be playing some of these songs again. I got to the point where I hated my own songs. I just felt nothing about them. And I'm playing them now, and it's fun. So I'm actually really looking forward to playing live again and putting out a new album whenever that day comes. All right, I'll see you guys when I see you. Cheers. Riff.